may be seated. I want us to look at one of a number of service-oriented scriptures. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, the 15th chapter, the very last verse of the chapter. 15:58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord. That's a major verse often referred to regarding serving the Lord. Psalm 100, serve the Lord with gladness. I want to look then at the function that's required in some degree of every Christian. No one's really exempt here of serving the Lord. And the definition, very simple definition of service, is working for another as he or she directs. That's a very simple definition. Serving, working for another as he or she directs. In this case, of course, it is those of us that are Christians acting as the Lord directs us. Obedience is basically all we're talking about. And there are three things that I want us to see here about Christian service. One, it is a choice. It's a choice. A verse that's hanging on the walls of a lot of people's homes, on a plaque or something. Choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua's words to the people of Israel. So whom we serve is a choice. Brings with it a sense of obligation. God told me to, but I still have a choice. I can choose not to. So it is a choice. To serve at all is a choice. Will I obey? Will I pitch in and do something in the kingdom of God? Service isn't only within the organization of the church itself. That's the primary place. But obviously, I serve the Lord every day, or should, every place I go. And just briefly, how am I supposed to serve? I'm supposed to serve with my whole heart. Heartily, Paul says. Serve heartily, said, not as unto men, but as unto God. Second, when am I to serve? Continually. Paul uses the word here, always. Always. Always abounding in the work of the Lord. Now, so when is continually. And that's going to involve priority. Let me say just a couple of things there. Your choice is not going to be, as Christians, people that attend faithfully church, your choice is not, okay, I got to serve God. I either serve God or run this local drug ring. I don't know what to do. I'm going to be a human trafficker, or I'm going to help in the nursery. Those are not the kinds of choices we make. They're not choices between good and evil. they're always choices of sometimes razor-thin priorities. Okay? Now, I'm going to just be honest with you. I have told a few people a couple of times, my wife 50,000 times, I'm never going to talk about priorities and sports and all that stuff again, because it doesn't do any good. But that's not right. If I'm serving God, I will say the truth, whether it does any good or not. Okay? Again, we're not making choice between good and evil. It's usually better and best. None of the activities that I can think of that we get involved in and that the world today is just clamoring for are evil. I love sports. We know God loves sports because he loves the Green Bay Packers and the New York Yankees, okay? He's for them. The sports metaphor is everywhere in the Bible. God uses it, run the race, fight the good fight, boxing, so forth. It's everywhere. There's nothing wrong with it. I think there's huge benefit. There are personality strengths that can be honed. There are confidence-building things. The first football game my son Jonathan, I think he was in ninth grade, played, and he was taller than most of the kids, and so I'm thinking he's going to be quite a football player. Here he is with a uniform and a helmet and all, everything, and they had him on the line, and a lot's going on. And I saw him from the stands, and he was standing there like this. But that was the ninth grade. He learned confidence. He learned he could do things he didn't think he could do. So he ended up all conference tackle by the time he was a senior. He was a good kid, walked with God. That helps. But that taught him a lot. I don't know where he might have learned those confidence-building lessons had it not been for playing football. So I don't have a problem with football, with 4-H, with tiddlywinks. I don't care. But what I do care about and what grieves me the most is when we exalt that, and it's a process that I don't even think we think about. We sign up for this, and the kids come home, to whom, by the way, the kids come home whom we as parents serve continually. We never tell them, no, you can't do that. You choose one. No, we never do. They come home, they got the sign-up sheet, and it's $400 for the uniform and $900 for the travel. Oh, okay. He wants to do it. So we sign up. And before we realize it, we've signed up for about 18 sports, and then we can't make Wednesday night youth group because we've got fill in the blank. Well, I can't volunteer because Billy Bob made a traveling team. And we're going to Louisiana for tiddlywinks. That's what drives me nuts. And I bear with me in my dreary stories. I was a really good baseball fielder. Real fast on the bases. Couldn't hit to save my life. Okay? So, playing Little League, if there was a Wednesday night game, previously my dad and mom had talked to the coach, said, hey, there was only one field and it was about 2 blocks from our church. When it gets to be close to 7 o'clock or whatever, you excuse him and he'll walk to the church. Now, the coach was very agreeable to that. I have wondered since why. It could have been, you know what I mean? If I was a 400 hitter, he might have been wringing his hands. But since I was like I wasn't even batting my weight, he was okay. Yeah, that's fine. But about third or fourth inning, I left. Now, contrary to common report, that didn't make me turn out weird. Okay? I'll tell you what it taught me. Just get out of the way of anything to do with God. God is first. I know that I will go home and I will tell Liz again. I'll never say a word again because it doesn't do any good. But it's still true. Now, again, I don't hate any of those activities. There's ways we can work. I'm convinced of this. A couple things. We live in the worst town on the face of the globe for sports, elbowing everything out. Want me to just really get off the subject here? I'll tell you what really bothers me. But it grieves me. We all know we got budget problems, and I'm going to be careful because I know that I don't know all that I think I know. And sometimes when you comment on things that you're not involved in, you can be off. But it bothers me to see us. What do we cut? We cut librarians. We cut academics. We cut gifted and talented. Okay? Now, I don't know for sure, but I'm willing to bet that there's not going to be a lot of hacking at the sports. You know what I mean? That bugs me. Let me tell you something else that I know you'll believe. I was, by all of my teachers, complimented as a gifted piano player. I took lessons for 5 years. But it was always at the end of a double-barreled 12-gauge that my mom or dad had to hold on to me to get me to practice. They put up with it for 5 years. Finally, when I was 14, and I wanted to quit because I wanted to be in sports. And so finally they threw their hands up and quit. But my dad told me, he said, listen, when you're 50 or whatever it was, you won't be able to play Little League. You'll still be able to play the piano. Well, I didn't pay attention. What's he know? You know what I mean? He knows nothing. I know, I'm 14. So, I quit. You know how many times down through the years of 40 plus years of pastoring, larger churches and small churches, when we could have used, if I could have sat down and played, we'd have not had gone a cappella or not sing at all. That talent's gone. I've even tried at times to start it back up. It quit. But serving deals with priorities. I have to look and say, listen, if we sign up for this or we do that, that's gonna infringe on this. We sign up for all kinds of stuff, and God's last. And He's the quickest one. I'll have to call whoever, and I can't help with coffee. I can't be an usher. Can't help with communion. Can't help with kids. No, I can't do that because we've got, fill in the blank. And it's stuff that won't matter at Judgment Day one bit. And again, I love sports. I love all of these different kinds of activities. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're not kept in their proper place. So service involves making some decisions. Your kids will actually live if you make them choose, okay? You're not playing 18 sports. You pick one. There's nothing wrong with football in the fall and basketball in the spring. I know all that. But this craze someplace has to stop. And you know what? Even in a town like ours, if enough Christian parents just crowded into some coaches' offices, said, listen, you back off of this Sunday stuff or my kid's out. You structure practices so they can get to Wednesday night. In the end, especially if your kid's a good athlete, they'll listen to you. But we're scared of the kids, scared of the coaches, so we don't do anything. Okay. That's enough of wasting my time. Now, where do we serve? Well, we serve where gifts are. That's reasonable. God knows that. He puts us where we are somewhat suited for. I couldn't be in the nursery. Okay? I just couldn't. I can't do lots of other things. And it's ridiculous to just jam people into places. But where I have some gifting and where there's clearly an opportunity, where there is clearly a need. Service then is a choice. I choose to do it. Why? Because secondly, there's a challenge. I want on volunteer appreciation. Here's why I appreciate the volunteers. Because it's not a euphoric hop, skip, and jump kind of thing to serve all the time. It's a challenge. Paul told the Ephesian elders near the end of his ministry, he's swinging back from his third missions trip. He's heading to Jerusalem. And the Holy Spirit's already warning him and people around him, you're going to get taken prisoner in Jerusalem and you're not going to get out of it. And he didn't. He spent the next years in jail, finally beheaded, as far as we know, in Jerusalem. So he just met with the elders from Ephesus down on the southern shore of what's today Turkey. They traveled down and met him because he couldn't get up to see them. He described, he said, you know how I served the Lord among you with many tears and trials. Service often. Do you know what Jesus summed up his whole 3 years of ministry? He summed it up to the disciples. He said, you are the ones that have been with me through my trial. He summed up 3 years as a test, a trial. There's a lot of times that serving isn't fun. Yes, we're going to give you sprinkled donuts today, but that's just once a year. There's a lot of times, and I think we have to face this. It's fake to present serving the Lord as just a giddy Six Flags park kind of experience. I just can't wait to change diapers in the nursery. It's like going, what do? Go to Disneyland? You understand? It's not fun. A lot of times there's heaviness, there's weariness, there's opposition, there's people who complain about your volunteering. They don't like the way you did this or you did that, and for goodness sakes, you're just volunteering. But they're sure to let you know, I didn't like the way you did this. You know? There's lots of challenges in serving. People will fail you. Do you know the number one issue in churches today, large or small, doesn't matter the size, is other people short-term notice bailing out as a volunteer, and somebody else has to step in with no notice, pick up the slack. I had a professor in seminary. He taught homiletics, which is preaching. And he had pastored, while he was in college, he pastored a little church in Iowa, a little country church. In fact, in a weird coincidence, my brother-in-law, who attended the same school 40 years later, pastored the same church that my homiletics professor had pastored, a little student pastor out in the country in Iowa. And he had a real problem with people just not showing up. Sunday school teachers, nursery people, or whatever, they just didn't show up. And so he told us that he just had it. So he didn't even tell his family until early Sunday morning. Got him up a little extra early, got his wife and kids up, they got dressed, and he said, now, get in the car. They got in the car, and they drove about 60 miles away to Des Moines. Told nobody. He's the preacher. He told nobody. And they didn't have cell phones then. They didn't have any of that kind of stuff. And they spent the day in Des Moines. And just moseyed back to town in time for the evening service. Well, they had the constable. This is a little farming community. Yeah, they had the constable looking for him. They were phoning everybody they could think of. They were calling his family. And they just showed up and acted like, how you doing? And then he said, now, that's what I feel like. That's what the person in charge of, say, the choir or whatever, that's what they feel. Where are they? You had to fill in for me. He said it lasted about a month. And then things got back to normal. But people will fail you, and times you'll throw your hands up and say, I'm tired of volunteering. Why doesn't some other people help? And the people that do bail out. Why in the world do I? There's only one cure for that. There's only one way to deal with some of this, which will be the third point. But before that, there's also spiritual opposition. Satan will fight us. He's more petty than we think he is. We would think, well, why would the devil try to mess with a nursery worker or a lifeguard in the senior high or a junior high small group leader? If the devil will do his best to discourage you and feel, these kids don't really relate to me. I don't feel like I'm doing any good. I lead the small group discussion. It doesn't seem to go anywhere. The kids didn't say much that night. Or I'll teach class in here Wednesday night, and I'll say, now what questions we got? I think, A, I'm not that good of a teacher. B, somebody here is asleep, because it's just... You ever taught a class? I said this once to a church, probably wasn't the smartest thing, but it was when I was way less wise than I am now. It was a farming community I was in, and I said, you guys ever gone out in the field? You know how cows lower their head and just kind of stare at you through a fence? Sometimes that's what I feel like. They just look at you. And you'll go home thinking, why do this? Kids were up the walls. I tried to do their little craft thing about Easter, and they, pasted a stone over the grave, and they didn't care. They were tearing the sheetrock off the walls. What good am I doing? We're doing some good, or the devil wouldn't bug us. We know that. We're doing some good, or we wouldn't be discouraged from continuing to do it. And there's a reason why Paul said here, he said, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding, because there's pressure not to be steadfast. There's pressure to think, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. It's time I need a break. That's okay too, to have breaks. But I can't ever get out of the army of God. I've got to keep serving. Finally, there's a choice to serve. It's a challenge to serve. But we're a channel when we serve. I want you to think about this. I don't think about it as much as I should. But we, as Christians, Jesus always talks about the church being the body of Christ. And we talk about that a lot. Well, what does that mean? It literally means every one of us are the continuers of the ministry that Jesus had on earth. He helped the poor, ministered to the sick, preached the gospel, prayed, loved, helped, and then he ascended into heaven. But that work of ministering, praying, so forth, continues, only we're to do it. And the word in the Bible that's used literally means enfleshment. We are little Christs. That's what we're supposed to be. I read something yesterday that really struck me. Dr. Richard Taylor, just a little devotional that he had written. And he used a phrase that we always talk about. He says, we feel the job of the Christian is to make Christ known to the world. And I'm thinking, yeah, we use that term all the time. And then he, in his devotional, slightly corrected it. He said, no. Now think about this. No, it's not just to make Jesus known. It's to make him believable. That's different. Making him known, there's a lot of people that yak all the time about Jesus, and it drives you nuts because they're not backing it up with their life. The job then isn't to just make Jesus information, but so live that he's believable. There's truth to that. Most of us, I think God's good at least putting somebody into our lives that we can't deny. They really have heart religion. They're different than the yakking Christians that are always saying one thing and living another way. We can't dodge the people God puts in our path that make Jesus believable. He's got to be real because he does that kind of thing in a person's heart. That's our job. That's a convicting thought. Am I making Jesus, whom I claim to serve, believable? We're channels then. And our service, finally. This is what needs to keep us going. My service is not to any human or any institution. It's Jesus. And I'm grateful that there are volunteers who say, you know, I'm tired and we just had company all week and I wish I could just get out of helping with children's church today. I think I'll just text Lori at, 8:15 and tell her I can't make it. What helps you get over that hump? I'm not serving Lori. We love Lori. We love everybody else that is running, helping with communion or whatever it is. I don't want to let them down. That's a noble, good motive. But ultimately, it has to be, I'm not doing this for anybody but Jesus. He died for me. He died for me. So I don't own my life. I'll do it to him. That's why, for me, at times, to think, or for any of us, there's not the kind of results we wish we saw in our service, in our ministry. It doesn't do any good. It's fruitless. Nobody pays attention. No one changes. Therefore, I'll stop saying it. That's really wrong. Because if I do that, just not holding myself above you, but just if I use myself as an example, if I only preach things because it produces a response or people change, I'm doing it for the wrong reason. Jeremiah preached as a prophet of God for 50 years. Nobody ever got right with God. Nobody listened to him. 50 years. And the bad thing is, God told him before he started, he says, this is how it's going to go for you. And Jeremiah said, Lord, I'm done. I'm not preaching anymore. And then God had a chat with him, and then he started up again. Because it's really not each other that we're serving. I'm serving God. He never fails me. He's perfect. He loves me. He's good. He died for me. It's fine. He's worthy of it. I don't mind owing him. He's worth it. So we're a channel of God's blessing to the rest of the world, and then his blessing to our own heart if we see no praise from this world. So what? If I have Jesus' word that he said at the end, well done, good and faithful servant. That's enough. That's enough. Well, let's bow our heads. Dan, if you would come and dismiss us with prayer.